Good morning and welcome. Good morning. And welcome to worship with us here at First Parish in Framingham. Oh, goodness. Where it is still a little bit of a windy day. Whether this is your first time or your 1,000th time, welcome. Whether you are joining us here, welcome. Or if you're joining us online, let's take a moment to pan the audience and wave at those who are joining us online, as well as those who will be watching this service later this afternoon or later this week or whenever they stumble upon this. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. That means we celebrate and welcome all of who you are. Whether you are gay or straight, whether you use a walker or a wheelchair to move around in the world, whatever other identities I failed to mention, it doesn't matter your race, your age, your ethnicity, your gender, or your skin color. What matters is that you are here, a part of this beloved community. Which love has gathered together since 1701. Those people who gathered early on were people like you. They were people who were seeking peace, who were seeking meaning, who were seeking a community. So welcome to the First Parish in Framingham. Our chalice lighting words are from the Reverend Linda Hart, who writes, "In the dark of the night, around fires and candlelight, those of ancient days gone by would pause to remember. They would remember the names of those now dead. They would remember the beloved of their lives. And with them this morning we gather too to remember. We celebrate all souls today, all those who have lived and have died, the beloved of our lives, the unnamed and unknown who came before us, as their lives were lit by that of the holy, by that of the divine which burns within all of us. We kindle this chalice in celebration."
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve all life with compassion to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. I'd love it if you could raise your hand if you had someone in your life who, when you look back, or perhaps that person is still working with you today, really changed the course or the direction of your life. Someone who helped you figure out who you are. Yeah. Those mentors, those teachers, those people who saw potential in you. And today's story is just such a story. It comes to us from Patricia Polacco, who is the great children's book author and illustrator. You might remember some of her stories that we've shared in the past, especially that of the dancing goats that we do for our holiday pageant every so often. So she tells true stories of her childhood and her background. And this story is called The Art of Miss Chu. And Miss Chu was just that kind of mentor, just that kind of person who changed Trisha's life forever. And when the story opens, she has just come back to California. And she's going to school. She's probably about 9 or 10 years old. And she's going to class, and everything about school is great. Her teacher is fantastic, Mr. Donovan. He is new, and he is fantastic, and cares just deeply about his students. And he smiles, and he laughs on the daily, and everything is going so well that first week of school until she takes her first test. And he comes back with a test and a bit of a frown on his face, and it's an F. Well, Trisha is pretty used to this idea that school just never quite goes the way she wants to go. And not only that, but the worst thing about school is that there is only one 30-minute art cart lesson where she gets to enjoy the thing that she loves most dearly in all the life of her life, which is art, drawing, sketching. Only 30 minutes a week does she get this art cart in order to do the thing that she loves the most. Now, Mr. Donovan spies one of her drawings, puts it on the bulletin board, and holy moly, do the kids come away impressed. Trisha, you've got such talent. Oh my gosh, Trisha. Even the popular girl in class thinks that Trisha's drawing is pretty neat. Well, Mr. Donovan finds her one day right after school after having received one of those Fs in those tests that he gives every week, and she's crying. And so he sits down next to her and says, you know, Trisha, you know this stuff. You know all of the material that I'm putting onto the test. What seems to be the trouble? And she says, Mr. Donovan, all the letters get all swirly whenever I sit down to read and write them. I just need more time. He says, well, that's easy enough to do. Let's just give you some more time. And lo and behold, Mr. Donovan starts giving her more time, and she starts passing all of those tests because she knows all that material. She knows how to do it. And not only that, but Mr. Donovan takes one look at her second piece of art from that art cart the second week and says, you know what? There's a teacher in the high school, Miss Chu, and she runs a weekly art class after school on Tuesdays and on Thursdays. Do you think you'd like to go? Well, Trisha is so excited about this idea. She would most definitely like to go, and nothing takes her faster than her feet on that Tuesday afternoon when she comes running into Miss Chu's class and a bunch of high school kids. Whew. Well, that's a little bit scary. But Miss Chu is delightful. Everything you think of in an art teacher is Miss Chu. She wears a smock that's covered in paint that could be its own piece of art. She talks in an accent that Trisha can't quite understand, and she starts calling Trisha Teresa, which isn't her name at all, but that's okay because she gets to do art. And so Miss Chu puts down a salt and a pepper shaker on the table and hands out some sketchbooks. And she tells the students, I need you to see these salt and pepper shakers. And Trisha says, well, I mean, yeah, they're right there. I can see them. And so they hand out pencils and they begin to sketch. And Miss Chu comes down and sits down next to Trisha, watching her sketch, and says, "No, no, no, Teresa." I'll just give it a beat. "Teresa, I need you to see the salt and pepper shaker. See the way the light dances through the glass. See the way that they cast a shadow on the table. See the way that your pencil can make a dark, thick line and a thin, light line. See it." And lo and behold, Trisha starts to see, and she starts to sketch, and she can't stop sketching. Their homework for art class is to go home and make a sketch, and she makes 20 of them. She just can't stop herself. Everywhere she goes, she has her sketchbook, and she is sketching. And when she brings them in on Thursday, Miss Chu is pretty impressed. "Trisha, I like this one the best. Tell me about this sketch here." She says, "Oh, well, that's a sketch of Mr. Donovan's father. There's a picture of his father on his desk. And I think he really, really likes his father because, obviously, why wouldn't he have a picture of his dad if he didn't really, really love him? So I do a picture of it because I was bored in class." And so Miss Chu says, "This one here has so much potential, Trisha. Keep sketching. I want you to sketch this one 2 more times before we get to doing it with the art, with the paint on the easel." And so she comes into class the next morning all excited to sketch Mr. Chu or Mr. Donovan's father, but the picture's not there. And furthermore, Mr. Donovan isn't there anymore. Instead, there's a substitute teacher, Miss Spaulding. And Miss Spaulding is very, very stern. And Miss Spaulding says, "Mr. Donovan has had to go home because his father has died in Ireland, and he will not be here for 2 weeks. Pull out your textbooks. We're going to read." Well, that's Trisha's least favorite activity, isn't it? And so the words all start to swim again. And before you know it, Miss Spaulding has put a test in front of everybody and told everybody, "Pencils up, you have 30 minutes, and go." And 30 minutes later, she's ripping the paper right out from underneath Trisha's pencil. "But Miss Spaulding, Mr. Donovan always gives me extra time." "Well, Mr. Donovan's not here, and I am Miss Spaulding. And you will do as I say." She goes to art class that afternoon in tears because once again, she's failed a test. She needed the extra time. Miss Chu starts to put things together for her. Miss Chu says, "You know, Trisha, I have watched you sketch and draw, and you draw the negative space first. I think that when you see letters, you see the negative space first. And so it's going to take you some extra time to learn to read and to write as quickly as your classmates." And Miss Chu is spot on. Miss Chu makes up the phone, makes a phone call to her mother, and together they discover that Trisha's got dyslexia. They work with a reading specialist, and Miss Spaulding is quite the scoffer. Pfft. If she didn't spend all her time sketching, she'd be just fine, wouldn't she? If she spent more time working on this test, she'd be just fine. Well, isn't that the point, Miss Spaulding? She needs extra time. And Miss Chu is the woman in Patricia Polacco's life who not only helps her diagnose what is her learning disability, but inspires her to become the artist that she one day becomes. She is Patricia Polacco's mentor, the woman who becomes the absolute focal point for her young life and points her in a direction to where she is today. And Mr. Donovan, he's not too much of a schlub either in terms of being a mentor, is he? Mr. Donovan and Miss Chu together point her into her life's passion, and she becomes a most prolific children's book author and writer. And that is our story today.
This is the time in our service that we set aside for sharing our joys and our sorrows. Remember, I send out a link on Thursday or Friday to submit the things which are weighing deepest on your hearts. Today we have this sorrow from Donna Nelson, who writes that her friend Kevin McMahon lost his battle with brain cancer this week. He was a dedicated fire investigator with the State Fire Marshal's Office. He was always ready to help and to laugh at life. Please keep his family and friends in your thoughts. We also, of course, recall the joys and the sorrows that are too great to share, those which remain unspoken. Let us now take a moment to center ourselves in the ways that we know best. Could be focusing on your breath, could be planting your feet on the earth beneath you. As we sit in this space, we feel the breath of our ancestors. We know that we are their deepest longings. We are the summation of their failures and their successes. We give thanks for their legacies, and we give thanks too that we are allowed to dream even bigger dreams than they even dared to. We give thanks too for all that we have. May we be challenged with bringing more love into the world. May we be emboldened to comfort the mourning, strengthen the ill, bring company to those who are lonely. Let us be strengthened as well as we bring peace to more parts of our beautiful and broken world. And let us extend compassion to ourselves when we are a little bit too human. May these wishes, these hopes, and these dreams guide us in our living in the next week. These are the names that have been collected this year of our beloved dead. I will read them and I will try my best to get the pronunciation right. But I am also comforted by the fact that those who loved them knew how to say their names as well. After the list of this year's names is read, people who have died this year or in previous years, you are invited to say other names as well in the silence of this space. John Mylott, Nancy Riddle Lewinzuk, Aunt Murdy, Aunt Isabel, Aunt Eleanor, Cousin Linda, Ann Fendel, Bob Moran, Gail Webb, Jimena Fibrez, Carlos Rosa Medina, Ricardo Franco, Alfredo Pareto Martinez, Carol Elizabeth Rader, Philip and Selma Ludinger, Carl and Roz Frutkoff, Dulcie Ackley, Glenn Ackley, Barbara Ackley, Dodie Marbell, Bertha Lawrence, Kathy Ewing, Marvin Decker, Anne and Rich Segermark, Franklin Porter, Mary Porter, Andy Porter, Don Kaufman, Charlotte Nelson, S. Irving Nelson, John and Harriet Whittemore, Ed Uftring, Ray Greenup, Isabel Shute, Donald Shute, George Newton, Charles Carrion, Ruth Carrion, Mary Pusakian, Shannon McDonald, Forrest Washburn, Glenn Washburn, Richard DeBordeaux, Virginia DeBordeaux, Paula DeBordeaux, Richard Ortmeyer, Jack and Annie Del Hess, Norma Wallant, Charles Wallant, Bradford Bates, Frank and Anita Orlando, Kim Kudem, Esther Hopkins, Rob Palanchar, Pat DeComo, Bryce Stockwell, Jean Stockwell, James Morey, Carol Bouchard, Betsy and John Banjack, Lorna and Stan Merson, Betty and Jiggs Fry, Joanne Ickler, Belua Ickler, Harris Ickler, Dorothy Howard, Ruth Tolman Morrison, Grandpa Morrison, Greg Stoddard, Aaron White, Jessica Alm, beloved cats as well, Minnie, Dakota, Felix, and Gus, Dorothy Roberts, Cecil Roberts, Luis Rivers, Rochelle Sivan, Norma Bauer, Barbara Steele. I invite you to name other names of those that you have loved who have died. May these names, these people, these lives continue to teach us, and may they continue to be a blessing. The ongoing work of our congregation in this space and beyond depends on your generosity. The morning offering, if you have a donation or something to give, can be placed in the gold plate on the floral tablecloth table at the end of the service. Be sure to put your the paperweight on top of your donations. And if you're joining us online, there is a link at the top of our website at uuframingham.org. Well, I think we do need some traveling music still, so let us have some traveling music. Rebecca was telling me that Halloween can always be a tough time for a religious exploration program. Our reading today is excerpts from a piece called An Open Letter to My Mentors, Thank You, by Nana Kwame Adije Brenya, who writes, I grew up in libraries and bookstores filled with your pages. Back then, I had no idea who any of you were. I didn't even know you were possible. I read serial young adult and mystery novels that always ended with something that felt like justice. I learned to love reading in a way that was easy, casual, a fact of life. There was no status attached. I did not seek the literary. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't mostly. I learned to think of books as magical things born from nowhere that lived on shelves. I didn't know you then. Now I know where the magic comes from. But before I did, I was sure that whatever place that was, it was a place I could not be. There's a mural of great writers on the ceiling of the Barnes & Noble in the Palisades Mall in Rockland County. Ernest Hemingway, Zora Neale Hurston, and Charles Dickens and a bunch of others sitting down to tea. I worked in that mall in a store called Against All Odds, I swear that was the name. And on my break, I'd go down to the bookstore and I'd stare at the mural. They all looked almost like humans, but to me, they were something more. I say all this because I now teach. Now I have mentees, and I want it on record that you have all helped me in far more ways than you know. You taught me to try to make work undeniable. You showed me the strange ways words could come, and more than teaching, You spoke to me not not as if I was almost, but if I was. Like I was already there, already of consequence, already whatever I hoped to be or something greater. Thank you. And so I work to be a true mentor. A true mentor listens when a mentee tells them who they hope to be, and a good mentor will do their best to get them there, even as they know on the journey their students will, in all likelihood, become something else, something inherently greater than they had ever hoped. Their advice and the way they deliver that advice is guided by generosity. A good mentor knows that even though you are trying for something impossible, you are not almost just a writer. You are a writer because you try. You taught me to teach with love. Thank you. In the Christian liturgical year, this is a rich time. November 1st being All Saints' Day, and November 2nd being All Souls' Day. Our Unitarian Universalist website defines All Souls' Day this way and expands the definition, saying that the traditions of the Feast of All Souls began independently of the Feast of All Saints. The Feast of All Souls owes its beginning to 7th century monks who decided to offer the Mass on the day after Pentecost for their deceased community members. In the late 10th century, the Benedictine monastery in Cluny chose to move their Mass for the dead to November 2nd, the day after the Feast of All Saints. Now, there was also a traditional Universalist observation, one of our heritage denominations, that was more a celebration of doctrine rather than of those who have died, at least according to a book of services published in 1878, which read, "It is recommended that the first Sunday of November in each year be set apart as All Souls Sunday for a special celebration of our distinguishing doctrine, the scriptural truth that all souls are God's children, and that finally, by God's grace attending them, they will all be saved from the power of sin and will live and reign with God forever in holiness and happiness." Again, one of our former congregations was the Universalist Church here, so we still carry that practice on as well when we say in our unison affirmation that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Of course, one of the other ways that our tradition celebrates is by earth-centered religions. The Wiccan observance of Samhain is one of the cross-quarter days in the wheel of the year. It is right between the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. It is the belief of many pagans that this is the time of the year when the veil between this world and the afterlife is at its thinnest. My colleague Catherine Clarenbach expands Samhain by saying Samhain is expanded when we think about the ethic of responsibility, expressed through calling out to ancestors and descendants, those who live in the shadows beyond the veil of life and death. When I hear the hymn that we heard sung earlier, rank by rank, again we stand, I think of all the times that I've heard it, the people that I have sung it with. It is a song about ancestors, descendants, comrades gone before, honored days, and names we reckon. It's a hymn that makes it feel as though the veil between this world and the next is thin. Yes, it is an old fuddy-duddy of a hymn that evokes in me a sort of world where the ancestors mingle with us and the future generations yet unborn. It was sung at my ordination. It is sung too, usually at the service of the living tradition, a service in our faith tradition held at General Assembly that recognizes the beginning, the middle, and the end of a religious professional's career, as well as their death. Graduation, tenure, promotion, retirement, and memorial service, all in one. When it is sung, it feels as though the veils between the past, the present, and the future are thin. What they dreamed be ours to do. And do you feel it right now as the air is getting crisp? As the leaves are turning orange, burnt umber, sienna, vermilion, and gold. The nights are colder too, and the days are as well. People over time have said that this time of year is a thin time, when the separation between the living and the dead is close. We feel it as things begin to wind down from the summer and we turn towards winter. We are betwixt and between. We go to the garden for one final harvest of the plants which are the hardiest, the plants which need a shock of frost to become their sweetest. One final harvest, too, of all the dead stalks, vines, and blossoms. During this thin time, I wonder, who are your ancestors? What are their names? Where did they live? What do you know about their lives? Is there someone that you look up to? What do they teach you? Yes, when I think of those closest in my life who have died, I do get sad. I wish I could call up my grandmother and ask what she thinks of the politics of the day, or what she thinks about how the Red Sox are doing. I wish I could chat with my grandfather about the amazing gas mileage my car gets, or ask his opinion on other things. I wish I could chat with my great-grandmother before the dementia robbed me of the chance of getting to know her. But beyond those ancestors, the stories I know have been pieced together by birth dates and death dates, and what I can piece together from genealogical resources. And those tell their names, the important dates, maybe their occupation, where they lived, but the stories and the lessons, they stop there. And this is what I initially thought of when I think of ancestors. Because we seem to think of, some societies seem to think of ancestors as being just our blood relations, or who is in our immediate family. How they raised us can affect who we are today. Of course, there's a whole field of study called family systems theory, which explores and unpacks this. Throughout seminary and elsewhere in ministerial formation, we focus a lot on our families of origin. We make family trees that go further than birth dates and death dates and focus on the quality of the relationships. But for some, the family trees feel rotten. The branches are tenuous. For others, they are small. For others, they might not know much about the branches or the leaves, or the stories might be tough. Focusing on our genetic relations doesn't paint the whole picture. I think each one of those people that is in my family tree weren't raised just by parents or grandparents. Their lives were also impacted by teachers, friends, coworkers, coaches, colleagues, aunts, uncles, godparents, therapists, etc. And those ancestors don't get credit. What if instead we considered how we are products of our communities of care? What if we consider how those stories that get told shape us? As I was writing this sermon, I did a quick internet search for teachers who taught me through elementary school and middle school. And I learned that my first grade teacher died about 2 weeks ago. I won't say her name because that's a security question answer, and I don't want you stealing my identity, but she died 2 weeks ago. She was 89 years old, and I hadn't spoken to her since I graduated first grade 3 decades ago or so. So I can't say that I'm grieving her death, but I'm remembering fondly the lessons that she taught, how she treated me when I was homesick throughout first grade. And even those memories are fading. There are gaps in that story. If we had to add our mentors and teachers to the web that creates our lives, our stories would get pretty tangled pretty quickly. And that would be wonderful. What stories would we tell? Are we well positioned to be mentors to others? Do we treat others with a posture that says, I know that you are still in process. I am too. Let's work together. When we recall the names of those who have died, I believe that something magical happens. We bring them alive again in a way. The neuroscientist David Eagleman, in a phenomenal piece of speculative fiction called Some Tales from the Afterlives, writes about one form of the afterlife. It's a book that I think has 41 different versions of the afterlife, according to his imagination. And this is one that resonates with me deeply. He says that there are 3 deaths. The first is when the body ceases to function. The second is when the body is consigned to the grave. And the third is the moment, sometime in the future, when your name is spoken for the last time. In this story, Metamorphosis, he says that when you are between the first death and the second death and the third death, you're kind of in limbo. It's like a waiting room at an airport. And there are callers who call your name when you go off to that third death. Some are sad when they die, that third death, and others plead with the callers, saying that these are generally the folks who have been here a long time, too long, especially those who are remembered for unfair reasons. For example, take the farmer over there who drowned in a small river 200 years ago. Now his farm is the site of a small college, and the tour guides each week tell his story, so he is stuck and miserable. He wants to go to that third death. The more his story is told, the more the details drift. He is utterly alienated from his name. It is no longer identical with him, but continues to bind. The cheerless woman across the way is praised as a saint, even though the roads in her heart were complicated. The gray-haired man at the vending machine was lionized as a war hero, then demonized as a warlord, and finally canonized as a necessary firebrand between 2 moments in history. He waits with aching heart for his statues to fall. And that is the curse of this room. Since we live in the heads of those who remember us, we lose control of our lives and become who they want us to be. The thing about our ancestors is that they were always changing. They were always responding to their lives and questioning and pondering. Instead, we seem to view their stories as carved in stone. What was transient has now become permanent. We forget that because we tell the story in its final draft form, it now feels unchanging. We don't feel their struggle as they wondered how they would go on. We don't feel the cheer a writer often feels when they make some change to their story that makes everything make a little bit more sense. It was never certain when it was being written. The thing about our ancestors is that they were always innovating. Change is the only constant, it seems, in life. So, my friends gathered here, even if our lives are not the product of our blood ancestors, we are the products of our communities of care. Those people who loved us into being, who stayed up with us while we cried or laughed. We are the product of our coaches, mentors, teachers, students, family, and friends. And today on All Souls Day, that is what we celebrate. That the story of our lives was not formed by immaculate conception from nothing, but rather gritty molding, braided together by story and song, crafted by others and our own self-culture. Maybe instead we give thanks that our ancestors breathed, that they set our life in motion, and now it is up to us to continue on, teaching our children well, whether we have children or not, discerning how to mentor well and getting new momentum and creating new momentum for the next generation. What we celebrate today is that those people who helped us become who we are. We are beautifully and wonderfully made by our communities, and thank goodness for that. May it be so, and amen. Thank you to all of those who made this service possible. Deb and David, Dean, Keith, Wayne, Pat, thank you for your help. Anne as well, and Sarah and Rebecca for doing all of the setup and so forth today. We extinguish our chalice. I think the wind already did that, but not the flame and the commitment that it represents. And so as we leave this friendly place, let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always, and the light hold us always. Amen, and go in peace.